What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. I've got an awesome guest today I am really excited about. I met Aneta Kmiecik. Did I pronounce that right, by the way?
Yes, it was quite good, I'd say. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. It's super.
Yeah.
I'm super happy to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't ask you how to pronounce your name, and I probably should have before we started. Kmiecik, is that right? I have like a few friends in Poland, and I butcher their names constantly.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I assume, at least. For me, it was quite easy. It took me like the whole 30 years to learn Polish, so
that's it. Is that all?
Struggle sometimes.
Right
yeah,
on.
It's Kmiecik.
Kmiecik.
Yeah.
Kmiecik. All right, so I had like a pause in the K and the M. Kmiecik, like one. A lot of consonants in Polish.
Yes.
It's a lot of consonants. Aneta Kmiecik is a senior UX designer at Knowit, a Nordic consultancy firm where she supports organizations from Norway in the digital transformation. She's an ex-architect transitioned to UX. She's an ex-architect who transitioned to UX design in 2018. She's structured, transparent, and dedicated to design. And after hours, she writes about her experience in the UX industry on LinkedIn and Instagram. She also mentors designers on ADP List. Aneta, welcome to the show. So Aneta and I met on LinkedIn some time ago. I don't even remember how I met.
That's
everybody
true.
on the show, I meet all these people on LinkedIn. And I'm telling you guys out there, everybody listening, if you're not commenting and following all these other people and following followers of people and finding out who you're following and who they're commenting on, if you're not doing that, you're doing LinkedIn wrong. There's a lot of really awesome voices out there. I came across Aneta, God, I don't even remember, 6 months ago, a year ago? No, I don't remember. Anyway,
I don't remember.
Aneta's fascinating. She's amazing. She shares a lot of really awesome insights about UX design and all that stuff. But one thing that I really wanted to talk to Aneta about was her background in architecture. So she's got a background in architecture. So Aneta, wait, hold on. Let me practice. Here we go. Hold on. I'm trying to remember my Polish.
Go for it.
All right, Aneta, so słychać, jak się masz? What was the cześć, kanapkę. Witam, what is it? Witam, welcome to the show. It's really great to have you.
Witam w programie.
Programie, yeah, there we go. Something like that. I can't remember.
Very
Programie,
good,
that one I
Jeremy.
should remember because it's program. Anyway, that's the extent of the Polish that I know.
Yeah, that was very good, really. I'm really impressed. But I asked you before the show, have you learned Norwegian? Because I am based in Norway right now. So
yeah, I know.
What about learning
know.
Norwegian?
Zero. I don't even know how to say zero in Hungarian. How do you say zero in Polish? I can't remember.
Zero.
Zero, okay. With a C. I remember that now. Okay.
Zero.
Moving on trochę po polsku.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, you speak a bit
right?
of Polish. Yeah,
A little
that's
bit
very
of, not
correct.
even a little.
Yes.
Just that's basically all I can say. I literally just all the words that I know in Polish, I just said. So,
But that was quite a few, I'd say,
it's probably better than most Americans, I would assume. But yeah.
You can start the conversation. You can start the conversation and then it just goes.
Yeah. So it's funny. I used to work with a big team in Hungary, and I was learning Hungarian for a long time.
Yeah, I remember you told me this.
I got pretty damn good at learning Hungarian, and then we lost the Hungarian team. We got a bunch of folks in Poland. So I started to try to learn Polish, and they're completely opposite languages, obviously. Finno-Ugric, I guess, is and Polish is obviously more Slavic, and they're not at all. They're completely different. And my brain, I just could not handle it. Like Hungarian was a lot of vowels, and it's like up and down and up and down, and Polish was just consonants, like words full of consonants. I'm like, I don't even understand. I can't even pronounce this word. So anyway, it's
very
my
tricky.
brain broke.
It's very tricky with Polish, I think. So you've managed to learn quite a few words, so you should be proud of yourself, I think.
Yeah. Well, maybe towards the end we'll do a Norwegian lesson or something.
Let's
but
do it.
Anyway. All right, so Aneta, I'm super stoked to have you on. One of the
Me
things
too.
that I'm fascinated about is your background in architecture. And I had a guest on not long ago, Andrew McDonald, who was interested in architecture. We kind of touched a little bit on this. But one of the things that I'm kind of fascinated about is obviously both are design, right? Both are designing for humans, but one is in the physical space, in the physical world all around us, and the other is the digital space. And both have very different paths to becoming either an architect or a UX designer. So I want to explore a lot of that today. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about you. I am so curious. How did you get from architecture into UX design?
That's a very good question, Jeremy. So let me tell you quickly my story. So I have actually 2 design degrees. So I studied architecture and urban planning and also graphic design at Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw in Poland, your favorite Polish city, I hope so.
Yeah.
And during this time, I was working also as a part-time architect. It was during university. I did many internships. I also had the pleasure to work in Japan for famous Kengokuma Architects office. And when I was finally done with universities, I started working full-time as an architect in Warsaw, and that was the moment when I realized that I kind of do not enjoy working as an architect so much. I was doing a lot of overtime work, I would say for pennies. So I think my last salary in Poland for like a full-time salary as an architect was like less than $700 per month.
Oh my gosh.
And my boyfriend is an architect. He's still an architect, by the way. I tried to convince him to become like a front-end developer or something, but no, it didn't work out,
Oh, no.
But we are now in Norway, and here the situation with architecture is a bit better.
Okay, that's
good. So I had a friend, actually a couple of friends working as UX designers in Poland. I got interested and I pretty quickly thought, okay, I need to change this because I didn't like to go on the construction sites. I didn't like all of this. Like I spent whole days on drawings as an architect. I was like basically... I was designing like multifunctional buildings, offices, not like interior designer or something like this, or like single family houses for families where you can kind of have this end user with yourself, chit chat and all of this.
Yeah.
I had like a big fishes, like as investors who basically, required a lot of cut costs and all of this stuff. So I didn't enjoy mainly the part with drawings and construction sites. And of course the salary was really bad. I did a lot of freelance to survive with my boyfriend, like visualizations, models and all of this, and graphic design as well. But then, because my friend was doing all of this UX stuff, I just got interested and I finished the UX bootcamp, but this was in Poland, so it was the cheapest option possible. And then after 2 months, I got my first job as a junior UX/UI designer or something like this. It was in a design agency in Poland. And 2 years later, I moved to Norway, and here I am.
Right on. Well, that's awesome. That's a fascinating journey. And it's funny because I hear people say similar things about architecture in the States where you don't really make any money. And part of the problem, I think, and I don't know if it's the same, I imagine there's probably a lot of international standards, I would assume, but or similarities at least. But in the States, you have to work under a licensed architect for X amount of hours, and they make like no money, and they don't actually start making money until they get their license and become certified, but it takes years to get there. So it kind of, a lot of people end up getting burnt out. And I know so many architects that have become designers, either UX designers, graphic designers, illustrators, all kinds of stuff. It's just fascinating how that, like, there just tends to be this exodus, I guess, from architecture to the design world, and it's sort of fascinating. One of the things I'm most curious about is, we talk a lot about how there's similarities. I'm really curious from your perspective, when you became a UX designer, what was transferable and what wasn't? I feel like there's a lot of stuff that would transfer, but then there's probably a lot of stuff that's like completely useless. So I'm curious, do you have any thoughts there?
Absolutely. I'm actually meeting a lot of architects these days as a mentor. So definitely there are a lot of us in this industry and a lot of us coming.
Yeah,
so be prepared for more architects.
Watch out.
There are a few things when it comes to those transferable skills, or how we will call it. First of all, I'd like to highlight that architecture is definitely not like 100% UX design. These are definitely different industries. On the other hand, the whole concept of user experience definitely appears in architecture, but it does also in every other, design, business, and other fields. So it's really hard to say. But I think when it comes to the transferable skills, first and foremost would be probably the ability to manage different needs and requirements. I think this is one of the biggest, especially when you are working as an architect on exactly multifamily buildings like offices, all of this stuff, or shop centers and all of this. This is definitely because generally it all depends on your job type. So for instance, if you do interior design, this is probably less balancing needs and requirements than when you design a multifamily building with a whole team and long list of, because in architecture basically we need to balance, of course, needs from stakeholders, various stakeholders. This is the same as in UX design. So we have, for instance, investors when it comes to, those dudes who basically give us money for this. And they are pretty tough sometimes, I'd say, because they basically want to earn, want to earn money on this. And this is purely the case. So usually when you are an architect, you need to balance their needs with low requirements. With requirements from other, civil engineer, all those people from pipelines and all of this crap. So there are a lot of people who handle this building design. And to add to this, there are, of course, your needs as an architecture office. So you don't want to design crap. Right? You don't want to use very cheap materials on elevations. You don't want to create like a very crappy plans for people if you are designing multi-family building, right? This is something that you want to handle pretty well. So sometimes it's pretty tough, but that's the first probably. The second transferable skill would be probably like hard skills, technical skills. So as an architect, you learn a lot of tools. 2D tools and 3D tools. So for instance, for me as an example, I learned 3D modeling in programs like, in tools like Rhino, 3D Studio Max, all the Revit BIM tools, and also AutoCAD for 2D. Probably this is something that some might heard about. But also, we also do need some Adobe like design thingy tools because we need to prepare presentations. So I learned Illustrator, I learned Photoshop, InDesign, and all of this stuff. So if you take this to UX design, Figma is really nothing.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's two. I can think about more. Of course, communication and presentation skills. You need to present designs. And when you design all those complex buildings, this is a lot to simplify. Right? So you learn to communicate very clearly, you learn to present. So you also prepare a lot of like schemas and drawings to explain your concepts. And there is probably, of course, visual skills. It really depends, of course, with visual skills because it's mostly for presentations and maybe elevations design. But it's not so much about learning about typography or colors. It's not so much needed in architecture, right? And the last probably would be from what I'm thinking about is, I don't know if this is called this way, but this is like systematic thinking skills. So as an architect, you start from a very holistic perspective. So you first of all try to figure out, okay, if this building is going to fit here. In alignment with law requirements, all of these things, needs, and all of this, the list that you have already. And then you move on with more detailed drawings and different stages. And ultimately, you can work on small details of the building. For instance, like connections between, windows and the wall, for instance. This is something that my boyfriend is working on, by the way. I hate it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You mentioned a few things that I think are really fascinating, and it makes total sense when you start talking about it. But the idea of presenting, I mean, you can't just design a building and expect the thing to get approved, right? There has to be some level of presenting and showing and the stakeholders. Another one is like really interesting, the investors and stuff. very similar to what we have on the software side, where we have stakeholders. The thing that I'm kind of really interested in, and this is something that I've always found fascinating, is when software started out in the 60s, I guess, right, long time ago, this idea of waterfall was kind of invented. I don't know if you're like super familiar with the background. Waterfall was actually like a U.S. government plan on how to build and release software, right? So this was like well-documented processes and stuff. And when I think about that, comparing building software to building buildings, it's like the only thing they really had to compare building something to was buildings, right? So they took all the requirements, then they designed it, and they waited till they had everything right, then they built the software. And it seems like comparing software to architecture, it's very much like a waterfall approach, if I had to guess, where you have to get it right. You can't just, there's no iterative approach to building a building. You don't just every year we add another floor or something. It's like if it's going to be a 100-story building, we got to get the foundation right, or this thing is going to fall apart. And that's something that I'm kind of fascinated with, the idea of getting it right the first time versus we're not really sure. We'll iterate, we'll test, we'll validate, and we'll fix it, in the next round. I'm kind of curious your thoughts there. Was that something when you got to software that was kind of hard to break that mentality of going from that sort of right first time right to iterate, changing it up as we go?
Love it. Love this question. Actually, this was one of the main, also maybe not main, but one of the reasons that why I also liked UX design, that we can actually iterate more often. Although with this part, with making this right, I'd say it takes a bit of time in some organizations to do it, right? But in architecture, definitely you can't write, design. You can actually, I would start from the beginning. So in architecture, of course, we have like long design cycles. It's totally in contrast to what happens in UX design. So we can't build a building and do an iteration on this. If we want to do it, it requires lots of money and lots of approvals and all of this crap. It's just almost impossible. However, during the whole this waterfall process, we try to iterate in a sense on the fake models, mock-ups and drawings, right? So we are testing a lot.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
But usually not with end users, unless you work on, for instance, interior design or single family houses, right? Then you have this contact with end users. Probably, right? Because this is, for instance, I can design a house for you and you come to me, so you are an end user. Whereas with multifunctional buildings, it's not the case, right? You don't meet end users. You don't meet those people who will be working in this office, for instance, and who will be complaining later on why everything is open here and we can hear each other whatsoever. This is something that is definitely missing. But during the process, you change drawings really thousands of times, because of really changes and requirements from a client, from an investor, like internal discussions, because of, requirements from the law or changes, or even the whole design process takes time, because in architecture, what takes a lot of time is to sync design with civil engineers, right? This construction part, I had a situation once in my architecture career, when we were basically almost, started building the building, and suddenly on my drawing there was like a column inside the window because we didn't think this, it was like a mismatch, misalignment. So that happens, but the iteration, I think that is something that we can compare, but not with the real outcome.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's fascinating. It makes a lot of sense though, right? You're going to iterate, you're going to test, because it has to be right the first time. So you obviously can't iterate once you start building, but you can definitely iterate on the design piece. So I love that. That's actually a really great call out. One of the things you mentioned, I'm actually fascinated by this, but the lack of human-centered design in architecture, as you mentioned. I'm just curious, is that, it seems like, I would imagine, like you mentioned a couple examples, the walls are too thin and people can hear, or the layout of an office doesn't make any sense and all that stuff. Is there a movement within architecture right now to push for more of that human-centered approach to understand who will be using this building? Or I could see on the other side of that is, these tenants might only be there for a year, but that building will last for maybe 100 years or more. So that's very short term versus a long term thing. Is there some movement for people looking to get that? I'm just curious. I've never heard of that before, but I don't know.
You know, I think it's really dependent on maybe an architecture office, and what type of investors you have and how much money they have, right?
Right.
It's pretty important. So if you have more time and more money, and your your architecture office is pretty knowledgeable, and they really want to create the best experience for end users in this building, it might happen, but it didn't happen for me, and I can't see it's happening for my boyfriend, who is still an architect. So I think when we did, for instance, as I told you, interior design or single family houses, it happened, right? Because it was one-to-one relationship. Whereas here, not fully, although you might sometimes work, for instance, with some selected maybe end users or maybe representatives. For instance, you might, imagine designing a university building. You will probably have some people from this university as a consultants on the building and on the plan and on whatever they want in this. Like, for instance, my boyfriend, he's working now on some details for university in Oslo. And exactly this happens in their case. So they have selected people from university, but these are not students. These are like teachers, professors, or who will share with you your expertise on how this, laboratory should be aligned, designed for their needs. It is more like this, it can happen. So you can have, probably we could compare it with like experts in UX design when you design for specific industry, right? And I remember designing for health, safety, environment. So we had people who were definitely more knowledgeable in this than myself, right? So I was going to them, meeting with them and talking with them about the industry and challenges many, many times. So maybe something like this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was just thinking too about this, and back when they designed the Empire State Building, right? The thing's been around for nearly, I don't know, when was it built? The early 20s or 30s, about 100 years.
Yeah.
So there's no way that those people designing it 100 years ago could have planned and accounted for all the various technological improvements that have happened over time. They had to design it for the technology, for the constraints when they built it. Elevators could only go to X amount of floors, and now they can go to 100 floors, and internet wiring and whatever, or even still, it's funny because maybe they would have designed it with space for cables for internet, and then there's Wi-Fi suddenly, and now we don't need the cables anymore. And maybe in the future we'll have like transporters, and we don't even need elevators, So I don't know. It's kind of fascinating to think about how would you even do that? I don't even know. And maybe there's a reason. I don't know. Maybe if there was a need for it, I would assume over time they would have started to do it. But I don't know. Anyway, it's just kind of fascinating to think about.
I think it's kind of hard to predict what will happen in the future and how the laws, requirements, and all of this stuff will change, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, but and also the law can change. We are kind of probably more strict right now with some regulations. I don't know, some dimensions, or for all of this accessibility thing. Also in architecture, this is a huge thing. So, it's also connected with money.
Yeah, it always comes back to money. It always comes back to money.
Yeah.
So here's something too that I'm kind of fascinated it's funny, but that might be the one similarity, right? One of the similarities. It's all about, like, the end of the day, they got to make money. But one of the things I'm really curious about, you mentioned presenting to stakeholders and stuff. And one of the things I'm curious about from your perspective is, it seems to me, and I'm making an assumption, I'm not an architect, that when I present a design of some kind or a layout, and I say, this wall has to be here, and the stakeholder says, I don't want that wall there. As an architect, you can come back and say, well, if you don't put that wall there, the building's going to collapse, so we have to do it. Whereas in UX design and design in general, it's often very subjective, and it sort of becomes, well, I don't like blue, and so you have to figure out, why should this thing not be blue, or why should this thing be blue for whatever objective reason, but it's often very difficult to become. It comes down to subjectivity. And I'm just curious, as an architect coming from UX design, has that something like a struggle you've noticed where you have to fight more than you may have as a quote unquote expert architect?
Yeah, That's a very good point. Actually, that's definitely something that I sometimes struggle with, and this is definitely a pain point of the UX design industry, that sometimes it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and energy to collaborate with stakeholders and to take your designs further in the pipeline, right? So definitely architecture wasn't so flexible. We had more rules when it comes to law requirements, but also when it comes to, I don't know, all of these requirements connected with fire, sun, there are many things that you can find many arguments for certain things. And also, some people, like investors, they might not understand everything. So, you have this advantage that you can, a bit play with the story to, because those people are not internal in your architecture office. Usually, they are we are like a design agency, usually, kind of. So we are a consultancy, I would say. So they're coming to us for some meetings, so we can do it online. I was doing this offline. So we had a lot of feedback sessions, and it took a lot of time, like hours, like not 2 hours, but a couple, 4, 6 to make everyone aligned. And usually ultimately it wasn't aligned. Sometimes with all those experts, like, I don't know, the guy who needs to sign the papers for you for this fire things, he might, for instance, change his mind as well. And you don't have this expertise. So sometimes what we are doing, we are basically signing papers. Okay, this is the summary of the meeting. This is what you told us. Can you sign this for us? This is what we are doing.
Everything in writing,
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what, I guess, just cover your ass in case something happens later. You can be like, well, they approved it. You did this. And again, that waterfall kind of mentality. It's very, I don't know if you've ever worked in a software team that was very waterfall, but there's a lot of, change requests have to be signed and back and forth, and you might have to go back and update the statement of work and like all this paperwork. And it's like, it's funny when you think about like the Agile Manifesto, they even call out all of this kind of going back into negotiations and stuff, going back and forth constantly, because it just took so long, and it was so hard to actually get work done because of all the bureaucracy and stuff involved with waterfall. So it's really fascinating. Again, it makes sense because you go back to like, once this is built, it's built. Software is called soft because it's changeable, it's malleable, it's flexible. I can take it apart, put it back together in different ways. It's not like hardware. Once it's built, and I can't touch it again. So anyway, that's kind of fascinating. I don't know anybody that's maybe industrial designers are very similar to architects in that they're dealing with 3D, they're dealing with physical things, and once it's built, it's built.
A bit,
I think about, like, for instance, like
different scale.
Different scale for sure. Like people building, a refrigerator, right? I imagine how could you iterate on a refrigerator? It's like I have to have an assembly line that puts these things together. The parts have to be identical. I can't just decide, 6 months from now, we should make that fridge 2 inches wider. It's you can't do it, right? So anyway, I need to get an industrial designer and talk about this too.
That's why you prototype as well. You did a lot of mock-ups, papers, 3D models, checking with like the scale, human versus the building, everything. So
yeah, the scale is funny too. I imagine trying to design a skyscraper when, on the screen, a person is like minuscule. Like, how do you get that scale right? Like, even thinking about that is like, I don't even know how you would do that. It's really easy to pull it up on your smartphone and like kind of, prototype for UX design. Pull it up on your smartphone and be like, oh yeah, that button's a little small or that button's a little big. But I don't know. Is there a trick to that? I'm curious. When you're designing this giant building, is there ratios that people tend to use that just work, or how does that? Totally off topic, but I'm just really curious.
Skyscrapers, unfortunately, I haven't had this pleasure to do it. But you deal with measurements that need to be precise. So that's how you do it, and the human has also certain, height, so you can easily check it in those tools.
Have you ever seen this? It's an American sitcom called How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
You've heard of it? So I had a buddy who's an architect, and he hated this show because it was this architect who, well, the main character Ted, he was an architect who built office buildings and just regular buildings and stuff, and then somehow he got a freelance project to design a skyscraper in New York City. And that was like the main plot of the show for seasons. And he was like, it's just so stupid. He's like, it's so dumb. Nobody would ever do that. There's no way this guy would be designing a skyscraper. Anyway, he hated the show because of that. I just think about that guy, that one random dude, like getting him. Well, I don't know how to design a building. I don't, and then ends up looking like a Lego tower or something. Anyway, that's really funny. So one of the things you mentioned that I'm really fascinated about, and this is something I'm really intrigued when it comes to UX versus architecture, is this idea of gatekeepers. We hear people throw gatekeepers around all the time in UX, and when you think critically about it, there are no gatekeepers in UX. There's no one keeping you from becoming a UX designer. There are no certification boards. There's no laws and regulations that say you cannot be a UX designer. Institutions may have gatekeepers, but the industry itself has no gatekeeper. And I'm curious, as someone who went through that process with architecture, do you feel like it was warranted in architecture? Do you feel like it was kind of bureaucratic and kind of unnecessary? And on the other side, do you feel like UX is worse off because we don't have a similar type of thing? I'm really curious from someone who went through that. What is your perspective?
Well, when it comes to all of the regulations connected with architecture profession, it's definitely highly dependent on the market, I'd say. I can see the difference even between Poland and Norway.
Really?
So I'm sure that's the same case with US. I don't know how it looks in your country.
That's a good caveat, yeah.
So there are definitely some differences. For instance, in Poland, you finish a master's degree, you need to have some years of experience in an architectural office and some years of experience on a construction site. And then after getting this, you can actually apply for an exam. And then, of course, this exam is quite expensive. And I've had, because I haven't passed this exam, I just finished the university and I was working, and then I was done with architecture. But I've heard from many of my friends that this exam is very time demanding and very tiresome in a sense, and also there are all those old dudes there who are basically saying, yes you can, yes you're passed, you're not again.
Yep.
So it happens, whereas in Norway, for instance, from what I've heard from my boyfriend, it's a bit of a different story. So the license is actually assigned to the office. So you, as an individual, you don't need to get a license. It's an office who applies for this, but you need to have some people with master degrees to apply for this.
Yeah, I think it's more like that in the States. That's how my friends who are architects, they work for a time under someone, and then they eventually get a license and they can sign the blueprints. But they could do the work, but someone like a master architect, I don't know what the proper title is, but somebody who knows what they're doing has to sign off. So it's very similar in the States, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so in that case, though,
that's in Norway and that's in Poland. And for instance,
sorry, I cut you off.
I just wanted to say that in Poland, when you're done with the license, then you can sign up those papers. But usually, most of the people in the office, they usually don't have it because there's like 2 people or a couple of people who signed this and get money for it from the office. It's like probably the owner and his friend or someone, So whenever you get the license, you will not earn more because you get the license. That's another thing.
Oh, I see. All right. So I'm curious though, so in this case, I assume, I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you didn't find that bureaucracy and that or how did you feel about the bureaucracy and the licensing and the testing and the requirements for education and all that stuff? Is that something generally architects are okay with, or do they usually dislike that idea?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So to be honest, we of course did complain a lot as well. I think this is natural for humans. We did complain a lot for many things, including universities, education, processes of getting license, exams, projects, the way how we collaborate with clients and all of this stuff. But on the other hand, I think that's pretty clear, the path in architecture, at least in Poland or in Norway, whereas with UX design, I think maybe it's clear when you are a junior and then it's like a bit of a fluff. You don't know how you can, get promotion, or if you don't want to become a manager, for instance, right? So, and then you're a bit lost. I've had it from many people. In architecture, it's I don't think it was for me. Like, I didn't feel like I had so many gatekeepers. I even don't know what does it mean for, it means many things for different people. Okay. I remember I worked for architectural offices in Poland, where I had, for instance, a boss. It was a lady who basically didn't like the whole architecture university and all of this educational process, and she complained a lot. And she was also, I think, maybe she had some bad experiences. So when I joined the organization, she was basically complaining about all my work every time, trying to say me, okay, Aneta, you can't do this way. Can you design this on paper? Let's go and do it on paper first. So she was very strict, but I think it's a very personal thing. So it's very, like, if you are a human, or you are like, I don't know, some strange dude, basically, literally. So, I don't think I felt this, to be honest, so much. Maybe when it comes to like salary and all of this, it also didn't progress so much in architecture. I finished pretty quickly, but I had friends or ex-colleagues working with me with years of experience, and they weren't earning a lot of money either.
Yeah.
And they were mostly doing the same kind of work as they did before. So, yeah, but with these gatekeepers, I would say it wasn't the case for me. I'm hearing that this is the case in UX design, but my question is, what does it mean to be a gatekeeper, and how do you feel in this? Because as you said, you can become a UX designer. I think in UX design, actually, people share so much stuff online. It's really unbelievable. In the architecture, I had nothing, literally nothing.
Right. Yeah, there are so many resources out there, and it's like amazing how easy it is to become a UX designer. The thing that like I struggle with, and I'm not saying I have an opinion on this necessarily, because I feel like this is sort of one of those things where I could almost be swayed in either direction depending on the argument. Yeah. But, it is so easy to get a job as a UX designer. Literally anyone can do it. And all you need to do is prove to someone that you can do it so that you get a paycheck. That's all it is. It's easier said than done, obviously. But you don't have to prove anything. You literally could just find anybody who's willing to pay you. And so one of the things that I think about often is, how oftentimes low stakes software is. If I create a chat app and there's a bug or there's a weird visual defect or something, the stakes are pretty low. The thing that I go back and forth with, though, is when we hire, UX teams to build really critical things like healthcare apps or, transportation, something where there's like life and death, or even not life and death, financial issues, where I could lose millions of dollars, or accidentally, I could design an interface where I make it confusing and someone might accidentally, I don't know, sell stuff instead of buy stuff, whatever it is, there's a lot of risk there potentially. And I think about, for instance, like some examples, like there was that Robinhood app where the younger kid, I think, like ended up committing suicide because he thought he lost all his money because the UI was just designed poorly, and he committed suicide. Tragic things like that, or the 737 Max where there was a bug, and this wasn't UX necessarily, but software bug caused the planes to crash. Software can have a huge impact on people in the physical world, and yet software engineering the same. There's no requirements, and you don't even need a degree in a lot of places now. And so it's one of those things where I feel like certainly it's like, I think in the US, I don't know what it's like in other places, you have to have a license and a permit to be a florist, which is bizarre to me. But you don't need one to be a UX designer designing healthcare applications. Like what happens if I make this bouquet of flowers incorrectly? Like nothing. Someone might look at it and be like, oh, that's ugly. But, someone might get offended if I get sent that during a funeral or something. But I mean, for the most part, in order to create a bouquet of flowers, I have to go through a licensing board and take an exam, but not UX design. And it like blows my mind. I don't know. It's just such a bizarre scenario that we've built. It's like this organic thing we built over time. No licensing boards. Anybody could do it. And there's a lot of risk there. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel what you're saying. I worked in health safety environment, so I know that you can have a very huge impact on humans. And if you design software for really specific, unique cases, That's a lot of responsibility, right? And people sometimes can't see it when they start with UX design. They think that they will do those, nice pictures online, websites, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
But it really depends on an organization and topic, that's for sure. But when it comes to all of these licenses, as I told you, I do not have a license in architecture, and I was an architect. I worked as an architect, so not every architect needs to have it in an office. I did also have an ex-colleague in one of the offices I worked for, and these persons didn't even finish the architecture university.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But, yeah, it was like a friend started designing buildings and then came to the office and stayed there without any degree. So it can happen. You just need a person who will sign this for you. Right. But this is kind of a bit of a, people are more aware about architecture because it's been with us for years, ages, right? Yeah. Whereas with UX design, people can't even, we still argue about UX versus UI versus, service design. Should we call ourselves UX designers or product designers, and we do not discuss those topics that you mentioned about, right? Those serious things.
Yeah. Well, it's not surprising.
Hilarious.
It's funny. I don't know. I think about how we've opened up UX to all of literally anybody, and we've got the floodgates open with post boot camp era where literally thousands and thousands of people have graduated from boot camps, and a lot of them are having trouble finding work. And it's not surprising to me that we have such superficial arguments about things like you just mentioned, because the education is so superficial oftentimes. And so I don't even know that people really understand a lot. Like when they come out of boot camps, and obviously I'm not shitting on boot camps. Every boot camp is different. Some are great, some are not. But for the most part, when someone comes out of a boot camp, they have this superficial understanding of a linear process that they've been taught in their very condensed 6-month boot camp. And so their understanding of the industry is very superficial. And it's not surprising that we end up having superficial arguments.
Yes.
So, I don't know. It says a lot about the state of the industry. And again, I've compared it to like the gold rush in the 1840s in the States, where the only people making money are people selling pickaxes and shovels. And that lasted for a short amount of time. And then there was, the rush died down. So maybe at some point in the future that rush will die down and we'll start to level out. But I don't know. It's just, it's been fascinating to me to kind of watch this progression of the industry over the last 10 years or so. And I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I'm not a mind reader, obviously. I can make a prediction, but who knows if it'll be true. But, that's kind of, it's funny. You mentioned these like really superficial arguments, and I just can't help but think, is it the cause? Is it the result of our superficial education system when it comes to UX? I have no idea. I don't know. Maybe you have a thought there, but...
That's probably a huge difference between what I went through when it comes to architecture and when it comes to UX design, right? I have 2 degrees in design, but I don't have a degree in like interaction or human design. I just did this UX bootcamp, and to be honest, I learned mostly during the, getting my experience, and mostly, many times by myself, because many organizations do not have those designers inside, maturity and all of this. So that's another side of this topic, I'd say. But that's definitely something to think about when, people go, and sometimes they even don't go to a UX bootcamp, and they just decide like, one day, okay, I will need to become a UX designer, and they do not know anything about the industry. And when I do, for instance, mentoring, I often, many times, need to explain people how the UX design industry works and what type of job you can get. And some people are, after this conversation with me, they are like, okay, I need to think about this, because, for instance, their only argument for becoming UX designer was that they liked visual design.
Yeah, exactly.
As an example.
Right. Yeah, I hear that all the time too. And I think more about the gatekeepers, right? Like when I think about gatekeepers and I think about architecture, lawyers, doctors, etc., it's not just the accreditation piece that makes me an architect. It's the education institutions get accredited, right? And their curriculum can be, or their accreditation can be taken away if those boards decide that they're not teaching the right things. And at the very least, what I would love to see is some level of accreditation for education. Like when you see like programs at big name universities, if you're doing a 4-year degree, there's certainly a level of accreditation there. But boot camps often it's there's nothing, and to me that might be like where I would start if I could wave a magic wand and say, gatekeepers, whatever, abracadabra, gatekeepers, that I would start there and have the education system be regulated before I start giving licenses and tests and stuff, because I'm definitely also very keen on making sure that we're still promoting diversity and we're allowing people who can't afford to go places in, and it's like different backgrounds and different areas of society, and it's not just all a bunch of rich white dudes. So that's something I'm definitely keen on. Again, I don't know how you do that. I'm not like I'm definitely not the person qualified to come up with ideas here, but I don't know. Again, it's just, to me, the education piece just seems totally out of whack. I don't know. It's very inconsistent, maybe is the best way. It's just inconsistent.
I'd say, absolutely. That's a very good word that you've just said, that there is a lot of inconsistencies in UX design, but probably that's also because we have a lot of inconsistencies in reality, right?
That is very true. Yeah.
UX experience might be not the same as mine. At festival, you have much more experience than myself, but also we work for different organizations and, with different people. And to be honest, those people have more impact on how the design culture looks in the organization than in architecture. When I worked as an architect, my office were just with architects. We didn't have other people in the office. There were just architects, and those architects were becoming project managers, for instance, or CEO or other people. You know what I mean? There were no diversity when it comes to the profession in the architecture office.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the other thing, as I was thinking through this, I'm in my head. I'm having a conversation with myself in my head. One of the beauties of being diagnosed with ADD is I can talk to myself while I have a conversation with someone else. But anyway, what I'm thinking in my head is, who becomes responsible for the certifications in a way, or who becomes responsible for ensuring people are hired that know what they're doing and the work is being done properly. And it becomes the companies that are employing the people because no one else is doing it right. And the problem is all these companies, as you just mentioned, are totally inconsistent, and none of them are doing it the same way. So, and that makes it really hard for UX designers as well, because I imagine if you're an architect and you go from architect firm to architect firm to architect firm, it's probably pretty standard. Is that accurate, or is that an assumption? That's wrong.
It was pretty much similar when it comes to processes and everything, even like here in Norway. And when I would compare Norway, I worked also in Japan. So Japan, Poland and Norway, like the architecture process, kind of similar, I'd say, right? There are not so many differences as you said, but maybe it's dependent also on the size of a building, right? As I told you, a single family, interior design, small, big, large, multifunctional building, skyscraper, or,
Yeah. So there's some consistency there, right? And so as a UX designer, when I go from company to company to company, I might have completely different job responsibilities. I might work with the team who has completely different titles, but they all do the same thing as the last company. Or I might have another company that's got the same titles as the last company, but they all do completely different jobs. And my job might be something completely different. You just mentioned a few: product designer, interaction designer, UI, UX designer, UX, UI designer, UX designer, visual designer, whatever it is.
Visual design.
So all of these things are completely inconsistent. And the problem and again, I feel like this is sort of where I don't know, there's a balance, but having some regulation around it makes it easier for the people who are starting out, because when I go from job to job to job, I know what to expect, and I can make sure that I'm actually improving my value, personal value. Because if I work at a company for 5 years that's doing it completely, backwards, how am I worth anything to another company who's doing it right? I haven't learned anything, right? I'm not valuable enough to be hired again. So what does that mean for me? It ruins my career trajectory by having it so inconsistent. And it's great because I can say, anybody can get a job in UX. What value do I have if I'm not learning the right thing? And who defines what's right? What's orthodoxy?
Yeah, that was my question. Exactly, what's the right?
Who decides what's right? I don't know. I have no idea. You got certain people who certainly have opinions, but it makes it very hard for all of us to move around. I know you work in enterprise, right? So enterprise is like a mess often. I don't know. Like for me, where I work, it's not a mess in that, no one knows what they're doing, but it's messy in that everything is kind of like it's organic and people are learning and we're growing, and it makes it very hard.
That's why I don't work there anymore.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. But It's really fun. It's fun. The problems and stuff are really cool. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of a mess, you know. And so I don't know, working in enterprise versus working in startup, working in an agency, you could all be called UX designer, totally different jobs.
Yeah, that's totally, yeah. For instance, I can tell you a story, by the way. You want
Please
to
do.
hear?
Yeah, of course.
So I changed the job recently, and right now I am in a, like design agency kind of consultancy in Norway. It's like a Nordic organization, and this is there is something new that I'm experiencing here, and this is the way how the process of getting the offer and assigning the consultant and people in the organization in design office to client, how it looks like here. So basically, we need to prepare resumes, and we get like offers from clients, like with all this like list of requirements, basically tables with like listed things. Okay, this designer needs to have experience with Figma. This designer needs to know how to map user journeys. This designer needs to have an experience with service blueprint. This designer needs to have an experience with visual design. This designer needs to have experience, blah, blah, blah. Like a long list of requirements, and you need to fill out in the second column, like prove your experience with this. So you basically type everything, explaining, okay, I've done this and this and this, and then you send also resumes. And they hire like individual consultants from an agency. So that's also something new for me. At least before, when I work in a design agency, it looked a bit different.
Yeah,
and here it looks like this. I don't know how design agency looks like in US, but in Poland, most of the cases, it's like, you hire a team. It's not like a resume, internal recruitment process. It doesn't happen something like this. But here, in many organizations, design agencies, consultancies do it. And it's pretty time-consuming. So it's method-oriented.
Yeah, explain that. What do you mean when you say methods-oriented?
Like when the client lists you, okay, that's designer. I want a designer who knows how to use Figma. I want a designer who knows how to use service blueprint. I want a designer, do you do it with architects or with lawyers? You don't.
Right. Yeah. Right. You're like, I want a doctor who can blah, 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 and this and that. And you're like, but you have a bunion on your foot. You don't need a lung doctor. You don't need a brain doctor. You need someone to look at your foot. So give me your foot. Let me look at it, and I'll prescribe some kind of thing to rub on it. See me again in 2 weeks. Yeah. So, that's really funny that you mentioned that. Yeah. In the States, agencies, it depends how they work, because there's like consultancies that will hire a team of contractors essentially for 6 months and work on something. And then there's agencies that I might come to them with an idea, and they do everything like a more full service. They might, do all the stuff, and they might even build it in-house and then release it for me and then send me the code afterwards or something, So, it depends. It's all over the place. There's a lot of different places that do similar things, kind of what you're talking about.
It's all over the place, like the whole UX industry.
Yeah, not surprising. So, all right. So, Aneta, we've had you for a little while now. Anything else I'm just curious about from your perspective that you feel would be important for those people listening out there to understand about UX and architecture, differences, similarities, anything you think's worth calling out before we hop into this little game I got for you?
Yeah, maybe I can say one more thing. I had a conversation actually before our talk with my boyfriend during the weekend. I was telling him, I'm going to talk with Jeremy about the differences between architecture and UX design. And he was like, oh God, architecture. Anyway, we talked about like differences, and one of the things that we discussed with my boyfriend was that one of the huge differences between digital software and architecture is that architecture is a physical thing, and that we can actually experience this with different senses. So you can, for instance, you can sense this with sight, smell, like hearing also, but also touch. And actually, my favorite is touching, actually. I love touching materials on elevations and, feel the texture. It's probably something similar to where we are going with VR technologies and so on, but I would not say that it might be like 100% the same, right? So I think this is the huge difference. So if you would like to design products that you can touch, you can probably think about architecture, product design, right? Industrial design rather than software. That it's very untangible, right? This is something that we can just see or maybe hear, depends on the
I love
type
that you
of
call
the
that
technology.
out. Before I got into UX design, I was doing graphic design, so it's like traditional like print design and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have these, they called them paper shows, where basically they would just buy lunch for all the agencies in the city, and the paper reps would come out and with all the new paper, like Nina papers and all the different papers, and they have like the soft touch and the different textures and different weights and all this stuff, and pass around. They would give you all these books, and then you would take the books back to your office, and you're designing some magazine or you're designing a brochure, and you're like, "Ooh, I love this paper. Feel this paper," And that's something I actually really miss from graphic design was that. All the paper and the textures and all that stuff. And you could do like inlays and overlays and, all kinds of different things. It's really cool. But yeah, I just love that. I don't know. I miss that a lot. That's kind of something that I don't know. I kind of miss from the physical aspect of it. But yeah, I love that you're calling that out. All right, cool. All right, awesome. Well, Aneta, we've got a couple of questions that we like to ask all of our guests when they come on to help our listeners get to know everybody a little bit better. You got some time to stick around for a few questions. Let's do it. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Pretty recently, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carl Dweck, or what was his surname? I love this book because, first of all, it's not about UX, and I read a lot of books about UX and product development and all of this.
It needs more UX books. You don't need more UX books.
Exactly. I think mindset as a concept is very powerful. When you change your mindset to growth mindset, you can really change many things. The way how you enjoy your work, for instance, the way how you enjoy the project, or the way how you get value from something. So. And the way how you approach challenges. So I really, really enjoyed this, and I always recommend this book to my mentees as well.
Oh, it's a great book. Awesome. Yeah, send me the link, and we'll put it in the show notes. It sounds like definitely worth sharing.
No worries.
I love that. What's your favorite non-design podcast?
This is a very good question. I actually don't listen to so many podcasts, to be honest, but recently I have been learning Norwegian. As you know, my new job is fully Norwegian, so since January, I was mostly listening to Norwegian podcasts or podcasts that were, teaching Norwegian. So the last show that I listened to was Forskning, of course, about Norwegian.
So is this a Norwegian language learning podcast, or are you just listening to anything in Norwegian just to get
listening
to
anything in Norwegian? And basically Forskning, it's for researchers, they do some research and they share some insights. So it's, pretty advanced, sometimes challenging.
I know we said we would wait to the end. I've got a couple more questions still, but I'm curious about Norwegian. What is what language family does Norwegian come from? Do you know? Is it related at all? It's not related at all to Slavic, is it? It's completely different.
No, it's related to English, German. This is
it's a Germanic language. Okay. All right. Is it has it been easy to pick up? As if you've already learned English, I mean, all those Germanic languages are totally different. But
I'd say there are some differences, but Norwegian in general, it's not a very difficult language. However, in Norway per se, you have a lot of dialects. You have 5 main dialects and 140 sub-dialects, and people really can speak with different words and also pronunciation.
Oh,
wow. And
I didn't realize that.
Pronunciation sometimes makes a huge difference. So actually, this is the most problematic. But Norwegian itself, it's not very difficult, I'd say.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, just in the United States, I guess with the onset of the internet and TV and radio, our dialects have sort of merged into more similar kind of dialects now. But I know when I was a kid, we would go to Arkansas when I was a kid, which I'm not familiar with, but there's a state park up there. We go camping every summer. And there would be people in Arkansas that I could not understand at all. I'm like, what are you saying? I have no idea, just really thick, oh, y'all doing there, I'm going down there, But anyway, that was an example of that. But yeah, the dialect thing, I mean, that's got to be hard for people even in Norway that speak Norwegian. I can't imagine coming from a completely different place.
I didn't have this situation like this issue in Poland. We do speak quite similar, I'd say. There are some dialects like Śląski and other stuff, but no, it's not. It doesn't happen in Poland. Whereas in Norway, it's pretty much the case. So sometimes you need to really focus and Aneta, focus. You need to understand this user, or
Oh yeah, I bet. God,
sometimes
that's gotta be hard.
it's hard.
I can imagine. I mean, just to like, by the way, you're speaking in a completely second language now, and just the fact that you can converse and understand what someone says in a second language blows my mind. Like I said, I work with people in Hungary and Poland and Europe and India and Singapore and China and all these places, and it like blows my mind when people are able to have a technical conversation in another language. Like I can barely speak English, and you're having this technical conversation in the second language.
You're proud of us, Jeremy.
I mean, I'm not proud. In awe is maybe the right word. Like just amazed that anyone can do it. Not proud. I mean, yeah, I'm proud of you, but like, I'm impressed, infinitely impressed that anybody could do it. It's just like amazing to me. I could never fathom doing it.
There's so many people who actually speak really a couple of languages, really, like in Europe. That's quite the case, I would say, quite often.
Everybody in Europe speaks like at least like 22 languages. Everybody in the States can barely speak English. But yeah, I don't know. Something says something about our education system here. All right. What is your favorite meal?
You know that I hate cooking.
Do you really? Okay.
Yeah, the
all right, so
of yourself.
Here we go.
I do like. Wait, I can tell you a few things about myself. I do like Japanese food. I lived in Japan, and I love all Japanese restaurants. I do like seafood, and I really like good coffee and pickled cucumbers.
Oh yeah, me too. I love a good pickled cucumber.
In Norway, it's like probably seafood, but with other stuff, it's not the best, I'd say.
Yeah, I was gonna say they must have a lot of seafood. It's like basically surrounded by water on three sides. I'm looking at it now. I can't remember. I know it's like up there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Norway's on the left, on the eastern or western point of the peninsula. I was thinking.
Did you Google it?
I just did. Yeah, I'm very quick. Is it cold up there? You're in Oslo. It's got to be freezing, huh? That's like.
Oh Jesus, I'm sweating right now. Come on, no, it's not so cold.
Oh, in the summer. I guess in the summer.
I mean, basically the worst part about Norway for myself as a Polish person is probably the winter time and the darkness.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, even in Warsaw, like I was in Warsaw in November for 2 weeks, and it would get dark at like 2:30, 3 p.m. And I remember we were in a meeting, and I'm like, guys, can we wrap this up? It's getting dark outside. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's only 2:30. And I was like, 2:30? How do you guys live like this? I couldn't. Oh, it was like crazy. 2:30. I don't know. That's just like, it's so early.
Probably a bad weather also in Warsaw,
It may have been. Yeah, it may have been a little overcast. But yeah, it was really cold. I was not prepared for that. But anyway, yeah. What is that like in the winter? It's like, is it dark like almost all day there? Like you're not that far north, I guess, from Warsaw.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, I'm in Oslo, so compared to the north part of Norway, I'm pretty lucky. For instance, with Poland, with the north part of Poland, I think it's like 2 hours difference based on like if you would check this up online. But in practice, in reality, it's a bit of a different case because you have different weather, clouds and all of this. So it feels like there's dark throughout like most of the day, so it's pretty depressing sometimes. I hate November, December mostly.
Yeah. I like sun. I don't know. It's hard for me to do that.
I like to.
But I guess in the summer though, it gets dark really early, really late though, right? Like 10 or 11.
Right
probably?
Now, 3 a.m. you have light outside because I sometimes happens that I wake up because of something.
Wow.
It's 3 a.m.
The sun comes up at 3 a.m.? What time does it get dark?
Yeah, I don't know. I try to sleep usually when it's light because it's light 11 p.m.
You haven't stayed up that late. Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm old. I can barely stay up past like 10 these days anyway. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot? You've traveled all over the place. So
That's a very tricky question.
I hate asking Europeans this because I get so jealous of all the cool places you guys can go.
Yeah, actually, I don't have like my favorite spot, but I do really love Japan from various reasons. Like, not maybe the work part. When I worked there, it was like 6 days per week and all of this stuff. So not this part, but the traditions, culture, like all this views and all of everything. But I would say that Norway is a pretty good spot for holidays. Especially in the summer, because you have sun all over, all day long. So you basically can, sightsee all day long and all night.
Literally all day, yeah, right.
So
start at 3 a.m.
So I would say Norway. Last year we were with my boyfriend in Lofoten Island. It's like the north part of Norway, pretty famous island in Norway. And it was our first time there, and it was really spectacular. Reviews were amazing. The water, and though there is like the bad side of this, because the weather in the north part of Norway is pretty unpredictable.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, it's like first 3 minutes you can have sun, and another time you can have like a wind and rain and storm. And it's not so warm. So if you would like warm, then in Europe, I really like Portugal.
Oh, yeah. I imagine. Yeah, that's very different from Norway, I would assume.
Yeah.
I've never been to either, but I can only imagine Norway and Portugal are not really the same.
No.
But yeah, that's awesome, man. I got to get to Europe at some. I've only ever been to Europe for work, so I've been to Budapest and Warsaw, but I got to go for fun at some point.
And Warsaw.
Before I die. Yeah, Warsaw was really cool.
Yeah, you should.
I've heard Krakow is really cool too, but I didn't get a chance to go there for work, but one of these days.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
I'd say probably Notion and Google Doc. I love both.
Notion, yeah.
I use Notion for planning, like content creation as well, and all the personal stuff. Whereas Google Doc for, collaboration. Right now I use it a lot at work. Like, when I write in Norwegian drafts or so on, I just use Google Doc. So, yeah.
You mean Google Translate? Is that what you're saying?
No, right now it's
I won't tell.
ChatGPT, Jeremy.
Oh, that's right. Does it do translation? Does ChatGPT do translation?
Yeah, it does, actually.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because I need to write a lot in Norwegian these days, so I usually write by myself first, and then I put it to ChatGPT and ask him to check for mistakes in Norwegian. I don't know how good that is.
Ah, yeah.
Sometimes it varies, but...
At least you're not asking it to translate it for you, because I was going to say, you're never going to learn that way, and then you got to learn to do it yourself.
No.
But yeah, that's good. I like it.
We can snack. We can talk Norwegian, no worries. But yeah,
awesome.
sometimes checking, but it's not maybe perfect, but yeah.
Yeah. I imagine typing on a keyboard and going from Polish to Norwegian has got to be weird. What is that like?
Yes,
typing?
It's very.
The keys are going to be on different spots, right?
Yeah, yes, we have different letters in Polish, right?
Yeah.
I do not have a keyboard with Polish letters these days, so yes, I have. And Norwegian has also its own specific letters.
Right.
So
yeah, that's gonna be hard. God, yeah.
Probably what's harder? Typing. It's not the worst, but for instance, today I used 3 languages because my boyfriend is Polish. I was at work and it was in Norwegian, and now we're speaking English.
That's
so
the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah, and my brain is basically cooking right now.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. What language do you think in? Do you think in Polish, I assume?
To be honest, that's a very good question. And when I learn Norwegian, I use English. So
you translate it to English and then to Norwegian? In your head?
I do not translate it in my head from Polish to English. It doesn't happen these days. It's mostly English, to be honest, probably with some mistakes. So I just copy those mistakes to Norwegian.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. God, I'm just in awe that anybody can speak all these languages. It blows my mind, but I don't know. Maybe my kids will do it. I think I'm done at this point. I tried to learn Spanish in high school. That was a failure. I took 4 semesters of Italian in college. That was an utter failure. I tried to learn Hungarian. That didn't work. Polish just blew my mind, ruined my brain.
I can give you a tip, Jeremy. If you want to learn a language, you need to have a pressure. So, for instance, if you move abroad to Norway, for instance, and you want to get a job in Norwegian, have more opportunities, because those people here, they speak English, right? My previous job was mostly in English. But if you want to have more opportunities, then you learn this language.
Sink or swim. That's what we
say
here in the States.
This is like this pressure, and you feel it, and you're like, oh, Jesus, I need to learn Norwegian today.
Yeah, I know. Well, I imagine moving there and having people speak it all day, every day. What's funny is when I didn't get this far in Polish, but when I was in Budapest, I would try to order coffee and order all this stuff, and 2 things would happen. Either they would hear me speak in Hungarian and then reply in English, assuming I had no idea how to speak Hungarian, and I'm like, yo, I'm trying to practice. Like, let me practice. Stop. You're ruining it. And then there would also be the people who would hear me speak in Hungarian and then reply back in like normal Hungarian as if they're talking to just some random Hungarian dude. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I actually have no idea what you just said. Can you repeat that in English?
I can relate to this. I can totally relate to this. And it happened to me with Norwegian. Absolutely. Many times. And especially here where people speak very fluent English. Usually when they hear your accent, right? They are like, they are replying in English. Right now, it doesn't happen so often. I am probably maybe more natural in Norwegian still with my Polish accent, of course. But, but it's very normal.
That's hilarious. I love it. All right, Aneta. Well, before you get out of here, you've got a lot of places where people can find you. Why don't you go ahead, give yourself a plug, let us know where we can find you, all the various links and all that stuff, all the social media sites. You're on almost everything. So
yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Absolutely. This is the place where we met with Jeremy with our content creation. So you can just type my name and surname, this pretty difficult Polish surname, Aneta Kmiecik.
A lot of consonants.
Sorry, guys.
Check the show notes. There's a link in the show notes.
And on Instagram, UX, that's my account, so you can also find me there.
Right on. You're not on TikTok or anything like that?
I started with TikTok.
Getting into TikTok
I have an account there, but I haven't managed to post there so often, so I stopped. But maybe
too much
I will
for
come
me.
back.
I'm just... So it's like I'm over my head with I can barely post on LinkedIn. I can't imagine all the freaking social media sites.
Exactly.
So, anyway, all right, Aneta. Well, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
So
this was a fascinating conversation.